What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is something that I saw a couple of YouTubers talking about this over the past, I think, 2 days. I did see Dreamers Pro talking about this yesterday, and I saw his video on this. Uh, and I also saw, I think it was Sports and Fitness Rants, I think it was. I saw Sports and Fitness Rants talking about this. So I hadn't heard anything about this. So apparently the guy that created House of Highlights recently tried to come at Michael Jordan's famed 6-0 finals record. And he was trying to frame an argument that it has become the most overrated stat in sports history, as he put it. And he said it doesn't take into context Michael Jordan's entire career. He talked about how Jordan played 15 seasons, and in 9 of those seasons, he failed, uh, I guess, to win a championship. He talked about how um, earlier in his career, Michael Jordan was consistently losing to other players. He talked about when Michael Jordan retired the year after the Bulls won 55 games and nearly made it to an NBA Finals without him, which is not true at all. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit. He just, it was the same standard arguments we heard before that we've all destroyed time and time and time and time and time again. Um, let me go into this thing about, before I forget, let me go into this 93-94 team thing. They love to bring that up, the LeBron fans. They love to bring up, oh, without Michael Jordan, that team won 55 games, right? What they always fail to go into, it's funny because this clown, right? And now I will unsubscribe from House of Highlights knowing that a clown created it. What they always fail to do themselves is take things into context. He said it's just interesting to me how he says that Michael Jordan's record of 6-0 is never put into full context, but then they spend their entire time cherry picking things against Michael Jordan without putting it into context. Number one, the team from the 93-94 season was not the same team from the 92-93 season. Really, outside of Pippen, Grant, and Armstrong, and I guess technically Cartwright, but he was seeing even less minutes. Outside of those players, the team was basically different, totally different. The coaching staff was the same. The team was totally different. The 93-94 seasons when you started seeing the introduction of the players that would make up the mid to late 90s championship Bulls teams. Guys like Steve Kerr, who, by the way, he says is one of the great shooters that Michael Jordan played with, right? But what this clown doesn't mention is that Steve Kerr was barely making the league at that time. Steve Kerr was struggling. Before he came to Chicago, Steve Kerr was struggling to stay in the league, despite the fact that he was an efficient knockdown spot three-point shooter. The three-point shot, you know what I'm saying, has so much emphasis in today's game that he shrewdly mentioned Steve Kerr. But what he fails to mention to you is that outside of shooting threes, Steve Kerr didn't really provide much anything else. He was not a good one-on-one defender. He got cooked whenever he was being guarded, whenever he was guarding anybody else. John Stockton used to destroy his ass. Gary Payton used to destroy his ass. And Steve Kerr's lack of defensive prowess is why ultimately the next year they got a Ron Harper, who they've been attacking recently and saying that uh, Jordan didn't make Ron Harper better. Ron Harper had to change his game because of injuries. Ron Harper was a slasher scorer who was called a poor man's Michael Jordan before he came to Chicago, but the ACL injuries and other subsequent injuries robbed him of his explosiveness. Plus, as the league was beginning to change and the league was becoming, the style of play becoming more of a half court game, Ron Harper had to change his scoring, the way he scored. Like even before Chicago, Ron Harper was still putting up 17, 18 points a night, but he was becoming more of a jump shooter. And his field goal percentage plummeted from around 48% to about 43, 42%. And when he came to Chicago, they didn't need him to score. They needed him to become a defender. And he worked on his leg strength. He worked on his stance. He worked on his ability to be a defender. And he became a great one-on-one defender. And that's why he totally dedicated himself to being a team player, not playing for stats, but playing to win. And that's what LeBron fans don't understand. And that's why they always put up stats, trying to, denigrate players, not understanding that when Ron Harper was putting up those numbers, he was also losing his ass off playing with the Clippers. But I digress. This Bulls team was totally different. That's when you saw Luke Longley and Bill Winnington and all these other guys that would make up the mid to late 90s Bulls teams. Another thing, the Bulls also had finally acquired Tony Kukoc, who, of course, is in the Hall of Fame. But this clown doesn't mention that. So this was a totally different Bulls team. Also, at least 10 of those 55 victories, at least 10, came from games where the margin of victory is probably under 2 or less points. The Bulls went from averaging I think around 103 points a night to about 96 points a night. So their pace was different. The way they played was different. Their play style was different. But they emphasized defense more when Michael Jordan left. The great coaching staff of Phil Jackson and Tex Winter and all those guys were there. See, it's not fair to compare Michael Jordan leaving in 93 to say LeBron James leaving in 2010, because not only did he leave, but the team also became decimated by injuries. And Mike Brown, who was the reigning coach of the year, was fired. Their coaching staff was gutted. So they was a franchise in disarray. See, when Bill Russell retired, Sam Jones retired too. Bill Russell was also the head coach of the team. So their coaching staff was gutted. So you can't really compare when Michael Jordan left, because Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, B.J. Armstrong were in their primes. Also, I think it should be added and noted that the Eastern Conference in 1993-94 was pretty fucking weak. Remember, that's the same year that the Atlanta Hawks traded Dominique Wilkins for Danny Manning, which didn't work out at all. I think Danny Manning was gone after that year to Phoenix. So, the best shooting guard in the league, the best shooting guard in the East was probably Reggie Miller. And I'm not denigrating or knocking Reggie, but the Eastern Conference was pretty freaking weak that particular season. This is before the rise of the Orlando Magic with Shaq and Penny. They weren't quite where they would be the next year. This is before Grant Hill entered the NBA. Okay. This was a year where the East was a little bit, on the weak side. The bad boy Pistons pretty much were done. They were done. Isaiah Thomas, that was his last year. He was not the same player. That's the year that he suffered his Achilles rupture. The Boston Celtics were done. Charles Barkley was no longer in the Eastern Conference. So that's that point. About Jordan losing before the 6-0 record. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he was criticized for that quite a bit. While individually, you started having players as early as 1987, former players like Bob Cousy, calling Michael Jordan the greatest player that he had ever seen. While you started having a Bill Bradley say, I've never seen a player as great as Michael Jordan individually. At the same time, to be considered one of the all-time greats, you had to win a championship. And there was always that thing about scoring champions don't win titles. Also, there was a belief that a guard could not lead a team. There was this belief that perimeter players, and this is what gets forgotten, perimeter players cannot lead a franchise to a championship. These were the things that were said about Michael Jordan. There were even some who said that for the Chicago Bulls to win a championship, they need to trade for a dominant big man and have Michael Jordan share the basketball, share the reins, because a guard cannot lead a team to a championship. The Chicago Bulls were the first championship team to be dominated offensively by a perimeter guard. Now, we did have that championship team in 1975 with the Warriors, where Rick Barry, as a small forward, was averaging 30. But a perimeter player, Jordan was the first. Jordan destroyed the notion that a guard could not lead a championship team. He destroyed the notion that shooting guards could not, scoring champions could not win a title. And let's say one other thing about this 94 team that this clown keeps pumping up. They did not almost make it to the NBA Finals. When the Bulls played the Knicks, that was the semifinals. And while that series did go 7, that series could have just as easily been swept by the Knicks if you watched that series. The Knicks blew some games. So, even if somehow the Bulls beat the Knicks in that series, they still would have had to play the Pacers in the conference finals. So you're doing exactly the same thing that Giannis haters did with the Nets. They just magically put the Brooklyn Nets in the finals when that was only the second round. The difference with Michael Jordan and all these other people that you mentioned who've lost and won championships is that once Michael Jordan figured out how to win, they couldn't get him off that plateau. They couldn't get him off the mountaintop. They couldn't keep him from rising to the top. They could not stop him or prevent him from reaching the magnificent mountains and heights. Once he reached that stratosphere, he stayed there. He kept winning and winning and winning to the point where he almost got bored. It was so easy. So that's the difference. Bird and Magic and all these other guys, you could argue about the level of competition and all that bullshit. At the end of the day, it was too easy. So he retired. Plus, he dealt with a tragedy with his father, played baseball, aged, came back. And no, you can't sit up there and say Jordan was playing nuts. Because if you actually watch that series like I did against Orlando, Jordan did average 31 points, 8 rebounds, I think, and 4 assists. But he also averaged 4 turnovers that series. He played well. He didn't get a lot of help outside of that because no one player can win a championship by himself. But the main problem with the 95 Bulls, if you actually watch those games, is that they lost Horace Grant that year that he came back. The Bulls were a team at one point that were sub 500 before Jordan came back. He led them to a 13-4 finish. They finished 47-35, which qualified for the 6th seed. They played the Orlando Magic, who had the best record at home that year, 39-2. And they lost in 6. But the Bulls were soft as Twinkie filling when it came to their front court. They had Tony Kukoc, who was a horrible defender at that time, probably one of the worst defenders in the league. And he was getting cooked by none other than Horace Grant, who had left the Bulls. And because Michael and Scotty and those guys were crashing the boards to help out on the rebounds, especially when it pertained to trying to get prevent the Orlando Magic from getting secondary opportunities. That was partially because they were focusing so much on the rebounding. That was partially why the Orlando Magic also were getting off from downtown. Guys like Dennis Scott, guys like Nick Anderson. But once they acquired Dennis Rodman, that rectified the softness up front, that rectified the lack of toughness and the rebounding problems. And the next year, they shut that shit down. And by the way, Jordan came right back and did something we had never seen before, which is a player come back to his sport after he retired and dominate. The only time that we ever see anything close to that was Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad Ali was forced out. Jordan voluntarily retired, came back, and did another three-peat. And that, my friends, is what made him the GOAT. The three-peat. The second one. The second one. And it were not close. It was not close. And if you look at the three-peats, he prevented Magic from winning his 6th championship. He prevented Clyde Drexler from winning a championship in his prime. He prevented Charles Barkley from winning a championship. He prevented Gary Payton and Sean Kemp from winning a championship as a duo. And he prevented Stockton Malone from winning championships. He also prevented Reggie Miller from winning a championship. He prevented Patrick Ewing from winning a championship. He prevented possibly Alonzo Mourning from winning a championship in his prime. So these are some of the things that he did that had to be looked upon and observed and commended. So anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Tell me what you guys think.